Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Life's Worth Living podcast. I'm your host, John Gossett, and we're glad you're back for another week, and so grateful for all the viewers that have been watching. Those numbers have been rising every week. We're lucky we've still been charting. We've been moving up in the charts on Apple. We're being heard in 8 countries around the world, so really excited. Want to thank our sponsor, GTM Builders, for making this possible. They've allowed us to record in their model home. So we're in Overlake, Utah, Overlake and Tooele, Utah, and we're in one of their model homes. If you're in the market for a new home looking to build, they are fantastic builders. The Tooele County's premier home builder. They've got 4 model homes in the valley, and you can stop by and check one of them out anytime you'd like. I think they're open until 6 p.m. So if you're in the market or just wanting to see what's out there, come and check out GTM Builders. And tonight we are lucky enough to have one of my really good friends, Senator Daniel Thatcher, our senator here in Tooele County and also Salt Lake County, but he's our senator. And not only is he our senator, but he handles probably the majority of suicide prevention legislation in the state. Has been very, very, not influential, but you've been very great at getting stuff out there that's going to save lives. And tonight I thought it'd be really cool to discuss one of your babies from the get-go. What year was the SafeUT app actually brought out?
Well, the SafeUT app itself launched in 2016, January of 2016, but the seeds of the SafeUT app were actually started back in the summer of 2013.
Okay.
And
tell me how that came about. It
started when a constituent, and I don't want to name him because I don't have permission to tell his story.
Okay.
But this is a true story. I got a phone call from a constituent, a good friend of mine that I've known for long before I ever ran for office. And I'm going to call him Bob. And I get a phone call from Bob. And he starts off by saying, "I need to talk to you, Senator." And I said, "Well, I always know it's going to be a great conversation when you start off by dropping my title, Bob." And Bob didn't laugh back. And the biggest, baddest, toughest man I've ever known started crying. And he said, it's my boy. And he told me the story. His single dad, 3 boys. His oldest, straight A student, perfect. I mean, anybody would be thrilled to have this young man as their kid. Honest, hardworking. Kid wakes him up at 3 o'clock in the morning, 14 years old, and puts a noose in his hands. Wow. And he says, "Dad, I have been up all night trying not to kill myself. And I don't even know what's wrong. I'm just so unhappy all the time, and I just want to be dead. I've tried reading my scriptures. I've tried praying. I've tried listening to music. I'm so unhappy all the time, and I don't know why, and I don't know what's wrong, and I don't know what to do, and I just want to die." 14 years old. Thank goodness he went to his dad.
Absolutely.
That young man is still alive. Ended up serving a mission. Just the best kid in the world. So imagine that you're Bob. Imagine that you're a single dad and you've got this beautiful boy and you don't know what to do. So what does he do? So he grabs him and he pulls him into bed with him, and they just cried together all night long. So he gets up in the morning, takes the other 2 kids to school, takes his oldest to the emergency room. And this was in my Senate district. And I'm not going to tell you where it happened because they've since gotten their stuff squared away. But again, this was summer of 2013. He takes his kid to the emergency room, waits his turn, gets in front of the doctor and says, "What do I do?" And the doctor says, "Get him a therapist and bring him back if he hurts himself." And he said, well, where do I get a therapist? And he said, I don't know, Google it. But I've got sick people that need me. And walked out of the room.
Very reassuring.
So his next move was to call his senator. And he said, he tells me this story, and he says, what do I do? Where do I take him? And I had no idea. I didn't have an answer. So imagine my surprise when I learned that nobody knew where to turn. Nobody knew where to get help for suicide, which I was absolutely stunned to learn was the leading cause of death for kids in the state of Utah. Between 10 and 24, the leading cause of death, and nobody knew that, and nobody knew where to turn. Nobody knew where to get help.
Not even in the ER.
Not even in the ER, or at least in that particular ER with that particular doctor on that particular morning. And I thought, the whole purpose of government is to preserve the God-given rights to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Can you imagine not knowing the phone number to the fire department? Or not knowing the number for police or medical emergencies? 911 is an absolute godsend. It changed the world.
It did.
I mean, can you imagine if you had to find a 10-digit number to call to get help?
Yeah. And that came about in our lifetime.
Right. Well, your lifetime. It was 1976, which was the year I was born, in December. So
I was 6.
I have never lived in a world that did not have 911.
Yeah. And how many lives has that saved?
It can't be counted.
No.
And so my question was, why can't we have something like that for behavioral health? Why can't we have something like that for mental health? So I started looking into, how do I connect people in crisis to the services that can save their lives? Because we had these great resources out there. We had Uni I'm just telling you, Uni is the best.
They are.
The University of Utah's Neuropsychiatric Institute, those guys are big damn heroes every day. We've got Valley Mental Health. We've got all these local mental health authorities that do the best they can with very, very limited resources.
Yeah.
And there was very little state oversight. The state just said, well, the counties are responsible for it. But they didn't set standards. They didn't set an expectation. They didn't go through and say, here's the number we're going to use statewide. They just said, okay, Tooele County, you handle it. But the state gave them no resources to handle it, gave them no standards to set or meet.
So it was just all over the board, depending where you were.
It was all over the board. One of the things that I found was that we had 22 different official state suicide hotline numbers.
Yep.
Only one of them was answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by licensed clinical social workers, and that's the one overseen by Uni, which served one county out of 29.
And I can't imagine if you're in suicidal crisis and you call one of the other lines and get an answering machine. Well,
and sadly, we know at least one case where that happened.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine who, well, at the time I didn't know her. Let's move forward. So from the phone call from my constituent saying, where do I get help? That's when I realized that we needed to do more. Mm-hmm. And I started digging into it. I started researching it. I started learning about it. And one of my mentors in the Senate pulled me aside and he said, look, I appreciate your passion, but you got to drop this. It's an election year for you next year, and people vote for you if you make them feel good. And this issue is a massive bummer.
It's not a fun subject.
You have got to drop this, or it's going to kill your political career. No one's going to vote for the person who makes them think about dead kids. And I said, but somebody has to do it. And he said, is this worth giving up your seat for? And I said, absolutely. Absolutely. If it's your kid that gets saved, it is worth the world. And so I pushed ahead, even through opposition. I pushed ahead even when nobody wanted to hear it. My first goal was to get a single 3-digit number statewide. So I ran that bill in 2014.
And that would be similar to 911.
That would be similar to 911.
Okay.
There's only 8 3-digit numbers in the U.S. They're all federally designated, but there was one in Utah that the federal designation was for non-emergency public safety, which this would apply, or other government purpose, which this would absolutely apply.
Yeah.
And so my bill would have designated that number, which was not in statewide use, as the statewide 3-digit suicide hotline number. Politics got in the way. One specific vindictive person got in the way and was able to generate enough confusion on the issue, lied to committees, lied in hearings, called in favors to make sure that the bill wasn't going to go anywhere. And that's actually where I met my good friend now. She was in committee when I was presenting this bill, and she couldn't understand why all these people were asking questions that were not congruous to the bill. It's a trick that you use sometimes in politics. When you have to justify voting against something, you have to pretend you had a reason to vote no. And so here are these people making these unconnected arguments. And this woman I'd never met before comes up and sits down and said, I actually came to speak to the next bill, but this one is so important. And I'm hearing people ask questions, but I don't understand how you can not get this. Let me tell you why this matters to me. 2 months ago, my daughter attempted. She was a student body officer, wonderful, popular kid, suffered a traumatic brain injury. And her personality changed, and she was showing, difficulty, and we were getting her help, and she attempted suicide. And I asked her why she didn't reach out, and she said, well, I didn't know where. So if something like this existed, I know that my daughter would use it, and it could save her life next time. Well, from that point forward, we became very, very close. Mm-hmm. That bill did not pass in the form I wanted it. Sometimes you have to compromise. I couldn't get the 3-digit bill, but I knew that this issue had to move forward. So instead, I substituted the bill for something that would create a commission. Mm-hmm. And this commission would bring together mental health experts. It would bring together the folks at uni. It would bring together legislators. It would bring together mental health experts, emergency responders, and we'd get together and we'd figure out, how do we connect. If we're not going to get a 3-digit number, then let's get together and let's figure out how we're going to solve the problem. And so in 2014, I passed my first suicide prevention bill, and it was to create that commission. Representative Elison was my co-sponsor on that bill.
Yeah.
And we got the commission together, and we quickly established that the best thing would be a 3-digit number, but politics kept getting in the way. We weren't going to get that 3-digit number because people still didn't understand how important it was. So if we can't have a 3-digit number, what's the next best thing? No kid in a crisis, no kid that is thinking that they're going to hurt themselves is going to have the presence of mind to remember a 10-digit number. It's just not
Let
going to happen.
alone it's not a number that they're going to use over and over and over again. This
Right.
is something that happens in a moment, and they'd have to have that at the fingertip.
Right.
So,
And so what we thought was, if we did an app, it doesn't matter what the phone number is. You push a button and it dials whatever the number is that we program into the app.
mm-hmm.
So we could use any number if we go with an app.
Yeah.
And so the following year, 2015, we ran the bill that created the SafeUT Commission, and we started working on the app. It launched the following January, and to say it has been a wild success is like saying the ocean is slightly damp.
Yeah.
The SafeUT app, after some initial hesitance to adopt, once a district sees what it does and understands that it is literally a lifeline, that you can push one button and be connected to a licensed clinical social worker anywhere in the state of Utah 24 hours a day, as soon as they got that, they adopted it. And for those of you that don't know, John actually was pretty key to building education and enthusiasm for the program here in Tooele.
Well, we've loved having it. I mean, it's. I think Tooele School District is still one of the districts that uses it the most, has the most sign-ups, and actually is submitting tips and using it. So we're really proud of it. But we recognize the number of lives it has saved
Every day.
every day.
Every
And
single
those tips
day.
come in, and the district officials that actually are, I know they rotate that around, but they take those tips in the middle of the night if it's a life or death situation, and it's been incredible. I mean, I think it's right up there with 911 as far as what it has done.
Tooele has done more with SafeUT than almost. I'll take away the almost. I don't know of a single district that has a deeper commitment to SafeUT than Tooele. They have done just a phenomenal job, and I think a lot of it has to do with Dr. Rogers and his background being in mental health. But he's got amazing staff around him. Mrs. Oborn was our first champion of SafeUT. We actually gave her an award for that in 2017 because Tooele has one of the highest rates of install percentage-wise, and the usage per student is through the roof. The kids are using it, and they're getting help every single day.
And they're loving it. So, not to take us off track, but there's going to be a lot of people that are listening to this and watching it that are not in the state of Utah.
Sure.
Tell them kind of some of the things that you noticed immediately after the app launched. Things that you saw that were, oh my gosh, how did we do without this? How did we go so long without recognizing that this was an incredible thing?
Well, it took almost 2 years for it to suddenly be everyone else's idea.
Yeah.
That started happening in 2018.
I was going to say.
But the reality is, the premise is simple. The premise is, if you need help, you need to know where to get it. There have been a lot of groups that have tried to kind of duplicate the app. But what they fail to understand is the app is not the magic bullet. The magic bullet is all of the back-end commitment. Right?
Yeah.
So there's a state, and I don't want to embarrass anybody if you're in Colorado, but I'm going to. Colorado has an app where you can send in tips that go to the highway patrol.
Okay. And how does that trickle down to?
Well, it depends, because so my first problem with the way that Colorado was doing things, the reason I knew that Utah had to build our own, No immediate response, right? No push button back and forth. No texting back and forth, right? And I don't know if this surprises you guys, but the kids text more than they call.
Absolutely. And on the SafeUT app, they have an option. They can call or text. I think it's 15 seconds. Within 15 seconds, somebody answers and responds.
And it's
either way.
completely confidential. So unless you tell us who you are, we don't know.
Yeah.
Now with the tips are also seen by the exact same licensed clinical social workers. So we're talking master's level therapists with at least 2 years clinical experience before they're even allowed to touch the phones.
Wow.
So they see tips that come in and they see them live time. They see them immediately. Now, most of the time, those tips can wait until the morning.
Yeah.
Right? A tip that Bobby has been picking on Susie, that can be sent in the morning. But I'm going to give you a real life example that happened in Tooele County.
Okay.
A tip came in. So instead of calling or texting, which would have been better because that's immediate, a tip came in that said, my friend just posted, I have more than 13 reasons on Facebook. And now they won't answer their phone.
So when he says 13 reasons, he's referring to
that horrible, horrible Netflix show.
Yeah.
And if you said that to the average adult, they would probably think, well, I don't even know what that means. If you said that to the average cop, they would not know what that means. You say that to an LCSW, and that LCSW is going to say that person is immediately in danger.
Yeah.
So because of the way that we have things set up, that was seen immediately. That was seen live as it came in. So instead of getting set aside until someone gets around to looking at it, they were able to immediately communicate with that tipster and say, do you have an address? Do you have a phone number? So they weren't able to reach the house by phone. So instead they called Tooele County Dispatch directly and said, we need you to run code. We need you to get there right now. Run code means turn on your lights, turn on your sirens.
Yeah.
Don't stop for anything. Get to that house right now. So they roll up to the house, lights and sirens. They go up to the door. Mom answers the door. Ma'am, we need to see your child, and we need to see your child right now. And they were able to resuscitate that child.
Wow.
The whole family was home. Everybody was home. Everybody was in their devices, watching TV, on the computer, and they almost lost a member of their family. Wow. Who was alone in their room with the door closed. And that friend who saw that post and said, they're not okay. This is not okay. They won't answer me. I can't get a hold of them. Saved that kid's life.
Isn't that amazing?
Now, can you imagine if that tip had sat in a bin?
Yeah.
And waited until someone got around to looking at it?
Yeah.
So the problem is I've talked to a dozen states about SafeUT and how they can implement it. And they love it right up until they figure out they actually have to work.
Yeah. There's a lot of gears. There's a lot of things that have to happen.
First off, you have to have someone willing to take those calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that are qualified and competent and committed. You have to have enough staff to take all those calls, to take all those texts, and to go through all those tips. Not doing this doesn't mean those problems go away. It means you don't know the problems exist.
You know, and I think one of the things is I don't think most people are aware of how many of those tips come in. Not only tips, but you know, for instance, I don't think most people know how many attempts are seen at the local emergency room in a day. I mean, for instance, we live in a community, 60,000+ people in Tooele County, and our local hospital happens to see between 2 and 5 attempts a day in the ER.
So I'm gonna back up here. I'm rudely looking at my phone, but it's because I want you to see.
The people on audio won't know. We won't tell them.
I want you to see. I'm going back to November.
Okay.
Because with COVID and with the holidays and with all that stuff, November was the last time we actually had a full
sit down,
a full month.
Yeah.
But I just want to give you an idea. We had 47 tips submitted that involved a threat against the safety of the school. That's weapons, explosives, a planned school attack. 47.
Just within the state of Utah.
45 were verified.
Meaning
in 45 out of 47 instances, they actually found a weapon or explosive or a plan.
Wow.
Now, that doesn't mean the other two were false.
Yeah.
It means that 2 of them we did not specifically recover a weapon, an explosive, or a plan.
Yeah.
We had 254 suicide tips. 9 of those 254 involved a law enforcement active rescue.
That's
2 a week.
Yeah.
2 a week where we sent law enforcement to immediately respond to the site of an incident.
And that's 8 a day tips coming in, more than 8 a day.
Yep. 48 of them involved contact with parents. And that's optimal.
Yeah.
Right? If we
Absolutely.
get a tip, we call the parent, we say, hey, listen, Susie's really worried about Jenny. Evidently she's been saying some things. Can you bring her so that we can do an evaluation? Those are optimal. We have 100% of all high schools enrolled. We have 100% of all middle schools enrolled. Elementary schools, we didn't really push it because most of those kids don't have phones, number one. And number two, you don't really get into the suicide and the bullying and the eating disorders and the sexual assaults and all the other horrible, horrible things that come with junior high and high school. You don't typically get those until 5th and 6th grade. So we encourage it, but we don't really push it. We have 92.4% of those districts rolled out.
Wow.
Through their elementaries. All of public higher ed, all of our tech colleges. We had 2,701 unique individuals texting through November for a grand total of 67,531 texts.
That's insane. That's
well,
amazing.
We don't like the word insane, but
that is amazing.
I would say it's remarkable.
Yeah, I don't think people have any idea that there's that much going on with this app. Which the app is not simple. It's a simple solution with a lot of details.
The app is not simple, but here's the thing: if we didn't have those amazing heroes at uni, it wouldn't work.
Absolutely.
If they couldn't pick up the phone and call Superintendent Rogers or call Mary Ann or call any of the big heroes that work at the district that have committed that when these crises come in, we will help take care of them. Your school cops, your school therapists now that we've finally started putting therapists in school, thank God. These people are the ones that make the app work, right? Just sending in a tip through an app doesn't work unless there's follow through. And so the states that we've gone to, I'm going to go ahead and pick on Illinois. Illinois answers their suicide hotline 38% of the time.
How's that even possible?
Because they don't staff it.
And what's the reason for not staffing it? Funding?
It's expensive.
Yeah, well, it's all on how you budget.
Nobody makes them.
Wow.
And I'll tell you this, from the perspective of a politician, no one has ever said, I'll only vote for you if you prioritize mental health.
Yeah.
You can't campaign on mental health. And my mentor was correct on that. I will tell you, if you're not out there thumping a constitution, there's a lot of people that will call you a big government communist. Because if you really were about freedom and liberty, you'd be talking about freedom and liberty all the time.
Yeah.
Well, instead I'm going to talk about life.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about life. Because again, we would never in a million years permit having 911 go unanswered.
Absolutely not. And and 911 has its own, you and I have talked about this, 911 has its own issue with taking mental health calls because the average 911 call takes how long?
The average 911 call is usually under a minute because the purpose of a 911 dispatcher is to get someone to your location as soon as humanly possible.
Yeah, and the right person.
Right. So when you call 911, I'm going to hit you with, what's the nature of your emergency? What is your location? Where are you? What's happening? Are you safe? Are there other people around? Mm-hmm. Can you give me can you stay on the line until help arrives? So actually, it's not a minute because typically the dispatch time is
sure
2 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But their job is not to walk you through the worst moment of your life.
Yeah.
Their job is to get someone to you as fast as humanly possible. That is their core function. Now, the first time I ever listened in on a call at the suicide hotline, I will never forget, because I've got the little headset on. I'm listening in. Can't wait to hear like a real conversation.
Yeah.
And it's a dead phone line. There's nobody on the other end. So I'm impatient, right? How do you react if you get a phone call and no one speaks? How do you react? Hello?
Yeah. Trying to get them to answer you.
Hello? If you can hear me, I can't hear you. All right, try calling back. Thanks. And I probably have hung up that phone within 5 seconds because I've got stuff to do.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here, I'm getting impatient. I'm like, okay, hang up the phone. Clearly nobody's there. But instead of getting impatient, she says this: I'm not going anywhere. You just take all the time that you need, and I'm going to be right here when you're ready.
Wow.
And we hear this tiny little sob on the other end. And it was probably 5 minutes before she said her first word. That is why you need a licensed clinical social worker. That is why you cannot have someone at 911 trying to do the job of a social worker, any more than you could have a social worker trying to do the job for the people at 911.
Yeah.
Well, you people at 911 are brilliant at what they do.
Absolutely.
Their job is to drill down
Where are
to
you?
what you need.
What do you need?
Where are you? Let me get somebody to your location. And if we asked them to try and do suicide calls, it would impact and diminish their ability to do their primary function, number one. And number two, the average suicide call is 45 minutes.
Yeah, and that would take away from the 911 operators to get help to the people that
Right.
are in a different type of crisis.
Right.
Something that they can, get an ambulance, get a fire
Yep.
truck, get somebody out quickly. So,
And we had parts of Utah that did not have 2 911 operators 24/7.
really,
That's something that I'm very, very proud to have fixed over my 10 years in the Senate. Mandatory.
Yeah.
You have to have at least 2 staffing any dispatch.
yeah, what would happen?
What if you have to poop? Right? What if 2 people need you at the same time?
Yeah, which can happen.
Which can happen. Now, to be fair, you look at some of these more remote areas. Daggett has like 16 people in the entire county. And so the odds of 2 people needing 911 at the same time are low, and they have a lot of downtime.
But there is a very good chance of having 2 people
But
reporting the same thing at the same time.
But we still need people to answer the phones.
Sure.
So we've continued working, and since since we created SafeUT, we've continued to move forward. We've focused on mobile teams, so that instead of sending out police and firefighters to do these mental health calls, we actually have mental health professionals that are trained to do mental health calls. And that's exciting, and those have expanded to Tooele. We also are working on getting a 3-digit number nationwide.
Won't that be amazing?
So, 2018. Actually, it was November of 2016. It was the day before Thanksgiving, which is we celebrate Pie Night in my family.
I've been there.
You have been there, and we just lay out a million pies. Senator Hatch came in 2016, and I he was asking about my projects and how they're going, and I laid out to him that everything's going really well, but we still need this 3-digit number, and I've not been successful in getting this 3-digit number. And Senator Hatch puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, "My boy, you were thinking too small. I'm gonna have Ryan give you a call." So this is Wednesday night, about 7:30, 8 o'clock p.m. Wednesday night. Next day is Thanksgiving. Friday, 8 a.m., I get a phone call from Ryan. And I said, "Man, is the senator really that big a slave driver? You don't even get the weekend?" And he says,
Working on Black Friday.
And he said, Senator Hatch said this is really, really important and asked me to call you immediately. So that's what I'm doing. Tell me what your plan is. And so I walked him through what I wanted. And he said, "I'm going to be in Utah next week. Let's make this happen. I'm going to come. Let's make this happen." I called Congressman Stewart, and he had Lucy from his office come down, and we sat down in my office with Ryan from Hatch's office and Lucy from Congressman Stewart's office, and we walked through the plan of what this would look like and how we make it work, how we get the FCC to back us up on this. And so the initial bill was to direct the FCC to study the issue and to determine
how to make it work,
which they did. And it's taken a long time. It feels like it's taken forever, but eventually the FCC did come back and say, we're going to establish 988, hoping it's sufficiently similar to 911 that people will remember it. And my biggest concern, you still have to answer the phone.
Yeah.
And that is the part that no one's talking about. That is the part that has to be fixed. Before we can roll out 988, you got to answer the damn phone.
Well, like you said, Illinois, what, 30, did you say 38?
38%.
38%. Oh my gosh. How would you like to be in the 62% that doesn't get that phone call answered when you need them? Hey, where do they go?
Well,
I have a pretty good idea where they go.
Actually, 32% of them are forwarded to neighboring states. And that's wonderful. That's great. Because if you have something terrible happen in your state, if you have a tornado, if you have an earthquake that devastated Magna, you can see those numbers spike. So having the ability to roll over to other states is very, very beneficial. But if you're rolling over as many as you're taking, you are damaging those other states' abilities to provide services for their own constituents.
Yeah, you're almost passing the buck. Yeah, you're almost passing the buck.
Almost nothing. You are 100% passing the buck.
They're saying, hey, we don't want a budget for this. We don't want to find the money to get people to answer the phone, so we're going to let...
Yep.
And that's just wrong.
It is.
No offense to our listeners in Illinois, but this is something they can learn from, for sure.
It is absolutely 100% immoral.
And the only way this 3-digit number would work is if 100% of our states are on board.
Well,
they've got to be on board to answer the phone.
You've got to answer the phone. Now, Congressman Stewart, in his bill, is doing some really great things. There's something where they're authorizing states to charge a 988 tax like the 911 tax. How many of you know that you actually pay a 911 tax on every single phone line you have?
And how much is that?
It's like $1. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Nobody pays attention. Nobody cares.
Exactly.
Because the fact of the matter is, you have to have 911.
And the benefit of it is too great.
The benefit of it is too great, and frankly, it's the best way to pay for it.
Yeah.
So we're going to do the same thing.
Perfect. I like that. I like it a lot.
And so Illinois will be able to generate these funds, and anything that comes through the 988 tax will specifically say you cannot spend one dime on anything except answering this phone number.
Number one priority. Well, and hopefully in my grandchildren's lives, they'll be like you and say, I don't even remember a time when there wasn't 988.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That is my goal. And that is my goal. My goal is I want a world. Look, a world without suicide is a wonderful dream.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, so many of us struggle.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've learned is I wish that I had been more open about my struggles throughout my life. Because when you talk about struggling with chronic depression, I've been incredibly blessed. I come from a loving, stable home. My parents are about to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary.
How cool is that?
I was incredibly blessed. But I also struggled with crippling depression through pretty much my entire teens. Yeah. From the time I was 13 until probably the time I was 24, I struggled with terrible, terrible depression.
And did anybody know?
No.
Or was that something you kept to yourself?
I did talk to my parents about depression. I did go see a therapist for a couple of weeks. But I never told anyone that I reached the level of suicide ideation. When I was 17 years old, I made a plan, and I went through with all but the last step. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to get through it. I didn't know where to go to get help. I didn't go through with it. I drove home instead, went straight to my parents, told them, Mom, Dad, I'm not okay. I just spent the last half hour overlooking this cliff in my car. And I don't know how to get to right. If I had not had the kind of relationship where I could go and talk to my parents, I would not be here. And I wonder if I had been more open, if I had talked about the fact that I wasn't okay, would that have given my friend Travis the permission he needed to tell me he wasn't okay?
Tell me about Travis.
Travis was one of my best friends in high school. We ate lunch together every single day, and we lost him. We lost him to suicide, and nobody saw it coming. He was the funniest kid at school. Popular, well liked, never had trouble getting dates, but clearly he wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And we had a pretty tight-knit group of friends. There were 5 of us that were just completely inseparable. And I now know that 4 out of the 5 of us were struggling with pretty severe depression. And my other friend and I have often had this conversation. If I had known you weren't okay, I would have told you I wasn't okay.
And I think that's fairly typical with mental health issues, because I think we isolate and we want to, in our minds have a way of telling us that it's got to just be you.
Right.
That's nobody else is having that problem.
Look at everyone else. Everyone else is happy.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
Everybody
Why can't
else
you
is
just be happy? And we've had this conversation that, do you think that if we had owned it, if we had stepped up and said we weren't okay, could Travis have said he wasn't okay? Could we have helped him? If we had known he wasn't okay, we could have helped him.
Yeah.
And I think we need to reach a point where it's okay to say, I'm not okay.
Yeah. This is where I'm at right now. And I think people would be surprised how many people would jump in and do anything in their power to help at that point. I mean, that's, most people are really good. Most people want the best for you, but we can't know what someone's going through if they don't vocalize it and let us know.
And they're not going to vocalize it if they feel like they are a burden to others, if they feel like they're the only one going through this,
or if they're feeling a lash of judgment,
if they're feeling judged.
Yeah.
We lost a teen girl in. She had actually been using SafeUT. She had been getting help, and the counselor kept encouraging her. She didn't disclose who she was. She was using the service, but she didn't disclose her name, didn't disclose how to reach her. And the therapist basically said, listen, we really would like to see you and your mom. Can you get your mom to bring you up here so that we can, because this isn't going to go away. We've been helping you. We're happy to keep helping you, but for this to get better, can we call your mom? Can we talk to your mom? Well, she went to her mom and told her mom, I'm not okay. I've been talking through the SafeUT app, and they think I need to go see a therapist. Here's the problem. Her mom's not a doctor. Her mom's not a therapist, and her mom didn't know how to handle that information. So she responded with judgment. She said, are you trying to bankrupt the family?
Ouch.
How are we supposed to afford therapy? Why can't you just talk to me? Why can't you just get over whatever it is? She didn't know any better.
Yeah.
She didn't know that would be the last thing she said to her daughter.
Wow.
And that is why it is so important for us to have these conversations.
Yeah.
It is so important for people to understand. It doesn't mean you failed as a parent if your kid struggles with depression.
No.
Sometimes it is physiological, and there is no rational explanation for it. Sometimes it's a chemical that's out of balance. Sometimes it's an adverse childhood experience that you never addressed.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about it on the podcast before. I think they say that the average person will suffer with 6 bouts of real depression in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. And so when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling like, hey, this is not me, but this is terrible what I'm going through, that's okay, because that, it's good to know, hey, you're gonna struggle with 6 bouts of real depression, because when you're feeling the 1 bout of real depression, you're going to get through it, because there's probably going to be some somewhere down the line. Maybe not, but it's nice to know a little bit about what's to come so that you can gear up to handle those things.
Yeah. Well, one of the best protective factors is being able to look forward to something.
Yes.
If you can think about something that you are excited to be a part of, you can get through this, because on the other side of it, I'm going to see my daughter get married.
Yep.
I can get through this because on the other side of it, my son is getting a commission from the Navy.
Yeah.
I can get through this because I just can't wait to eat another chicken parmesan at Nona's on Magna Main Street.
And Nona's
best Italian food. I know they're not a sponsor. I just like plugging
We'll
my
throw it
friends.
out there because I love those guys at Nona's.
Oh, they're the best.
The best garlic knots.
Oh, they're amazing.
They're crazy. And, great people.
Good people.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yep.
I wouldn't have known about it if it wasn't for Senator Thatcher. So, we'll
I'm
give them all the
telling
shots.
everybody.
And I believe I saw on Facebook that they are back to.
Yep, they just opened Monday, so
Yeah.
I was actually going to hit Nona's on my way home.
Oh man, way to make me jealous.
You can come with me.
I'll tell you what. What I want to mention is what features are on the SafeUT app. Let's talk about the features that it has. So you have the ability to text. Mm-hmm. You have the ability to call, mm-hmm. and you have the ability to submit a tip. Mm-hmm. Tips range from
some of the bigger ones are planned school attacks,
which you mentioned,
weapons, explosives, alcohol.
Yeah.
Look, alcohol is a trigger, especially in youth, for domestic violence, for dating violence, mm-hmm. for assault, for
got drug use,
for fighting, gangs.
It's got bullying, I think. Suicide.
It's got sexting. It's got sexual misconduct. It's got tobacco.
And I think that's one of the things I want to get across.
Yeah.
This is not just, solely a suicide prevention deal. This is for our youth.
It's a safety.
Yeah,
it's a safety.
And there are so many things within that app that, if not addressed, can really become a problem. You mentioned the planned school attack, and mm-hmm. I was talking with Dr. Rogers fairly recently, as he told me a story about a situation we had in Tooele County where mm-hmm. someone had submitted a tip saying, "Hey, my friend is going through a hard time and he's planning to bring a gun to school," and so they went ahead and did what they could with the local law enforcement to make sure that did not happen. They were at the school. They had mm-hmm. everything secured. And when that young man came through the front doors, he was taken straight into a room
yep.
where they could sit down. Not only did he have one gun, but he had two. So,
and they were both loaded.
Both loaded.
And instead of, and this is what makes this story beautiful.
Yeah.
So, this kid wasn't a monster.
No.
The day before, this kid had done what he was supposed to do. He reported he was getting bullied. It got back to the bullies, who then beat the crap out of him. Told him if he ever told on them again, he'd kill them. Or they'd kill him.
Yes.
And so he's walking home with his friend, and he says, "If I ever get bullied again, it'll be the last time.
Yeah.
Because I know where my dad keeps his guns." Yeah. Now, probably nothing would have come of that, right? The fact of the matter, the fact that we are catching so many kids bringing weapons to school and doing things like this tells me these things have been happening all along. We just didn't know. I think that kid was a good kid.
Yeah.
I think he would have gone
pushed to the brink.
I think he would have gone to school. I think he would have been sick to his stomach all day. I think they would have stayed in his backpack. I think he would have gone home sick. Mm-hmm. And I think nothing would ever have come of it. And I think things like that happen every single day.
Yeah.
But what if the bullies had hit him on his way in or on his way home? What if the bullies had hit him at his locker?
Yeah.
It could have had a really, really bad outcome.
It could have gone south quickly.
So instead of kicking this kid in the face
yeah.
and throwing him in the dirt and handcuffing him like a big shot TV cop
yeah.
would want to, instead this cop said, "Kid, what's going on?" Instead of that kid getting arrested, that kid got taken up to uni.
He got the help he needed.
He got the help he needed.
Yeah.
They did an eval on him, basically to determine, is this kid dangerous, or is this just a kid who did something stupid? And this was a kid who did something stupid. Mm-hmm. So we didn't ruin his life. He doesn't have a criminal record. We took care of him.
Yeah. Which is the goal.
That is absolutely 100% the goal. That That is a true success story.
And there's stories like that. I mean, that's one instance, but there are...
Oh, we've got dozens.
Yeah.
Dozens.
Story after story, and story after story where it saved lives. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not. I don't even know if we've had that discussion, but within Life's Worth Living Foundation, we actually give out Guardian Angel Awards when we hear a story about someone submitting a tip that could ultimately save a life because they cared.
Awesome.
And so we do that, and we've brought them in and brought their parents in and have been able to recognize them, because I think kids that are willing to, that's a tough thing to submit a tip about somebody they obviously care about, a friend, a peer that they, care enough about them to say, you know what, something's wrong. And there's always that worry, well, are they not going to be my friend if I submit a tip? Are they going to have a problem with me if I reach out? But you know what?
They're not going to be your friend if they don't live.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we do. We want to make sure that they're recognized and say, you know what? Thank you. Because ultimately you saved a life. And I think this app, I can't say enough about it. I can't thank you enough for it, because it literally has been the greatest thing to hit Utah in suicide prevention. And, I mentioned to you, I want to talk more about this in coming weeks. I want to talk more about it because with the whole COVID-19 thing, how do you think that's affecting us?
So actually, you might want to have a conversation with Will. I understand he's your guest next week.
It may not be next week, but in the coming weeks, yeah, okay. We're going to have him in.
We had an issue where they were not squared away to work from home, because people calling in talking about mental health issues, there's HIPAA, and so you have to have specialized equipment. They couldn't get it, so we have 50, 60 people working in a call center, and they're mandatory. I mean, they're critical. We cannot function as a state without them, and they're all in an enclosed space.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we set up a test, a screening thing at the front. We checked everybody's temperature coming into the building, but as we have learned, COVID is a sneaky, sneaky monster. Mm-hmm. If one asymptomatic person got into that building, could have wiped out our entire mental health response force. And so I got to work and was able to get them some emergency funds to get them squared away so that they could start working from home.
Perfect.
And
the last conversation I had with Will, he was home.
Yeah.
But he was still working, still doing what needs to be done. And
And Will is a big hero, man.
Oh, yeah. What a good guy.
Will is amazing.
What a good guy. And I've worked with him on some local issues and trying to dial things in, and he's been great. But, with the SafeUT app, I imagine there's been a whole bunch of things that we haven't foreseen coming because, we've got kids being homeschooled right now. They are with their parents 24/7. There's kids finding out that they're not going to walk for graduation. There's been canceling prom. All of these things have hit, and I imagine we were watching.
It's probably been a pretty significant uptick.
Yeah, I was going to say we were watching the national news talking about California and seeing increases in suicides, increase in abuse situations, and at a level that they hadn't seen before. So I'm excited to have that conversation with Will and kind of see what has been happening, because this is such a great tool, and fingers crossed that we're going to see this 3-digit be implemented and
with fidelity.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're in a state and they're not answering, that's something you've got to push for it, because you deserve it. We deserve to have those resources.
And this is what I want to leave you with. If you're in Utah, we are absolutely doing every single thing that we can. If you're not in Utah, no politician has people reaching out and saying, I expect you to support mental health. We don't hear that. And the average politician is thinking about re-election. The average politician is thinking about Well, I have to keep my base happy. I have to keep my electorate happy. So we want to talk about things. We want to talk about education, and we want to talk about lower taxes, and we want to talk about the things that make you happy.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about things that bum you out. So unless you demand it, you're not going to get it.
Yeah. Again, if somebody is watching this tonight and they're struggling, please reach out to the Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. Please reach out. Don't keep those feelings to yourself. Like your friend, what was his name again?
And just hope that you live in a state that answers the phone.
Yeah.
And if you don't, your next call, don't give up.
Yeah.
Look at me. Seriously, eyeball to eyeball. Don't give up. If you call the Lifeline in your state and you do not get a live body, instead of giving up, you now have a mission.
Yeah.
Get to work. Pick up the phone. Call your governor's office and ask him why they don't answer the phone. Then I want you to Google who represents me and put in your state. You can call your congressman and you can call your U.S. senators, but since your entire state has them, they're less likely to respond. Find your local legislators. Find your state House rep. Find your state senator. They're going to be the ones for your city, your county, your town. Find those people and ask them why they don't care about the leading cause of death for kids. Ask them why they're not doing anything. And get to work and make them care.
Absolutely. I can't say any better than that. But yes, if you're struggling, don't keep it to yourself. Reach out. Find that person you trust, that person you can talk to, and reach out to them. Make it known that you're going through something. It will make a difference. But thank you so much for listening. If this is something that you feel would help someone else, please share it. That's the only way we get this podcast out there. Please subscribe, rate, and review. And again, thank you so much for being with us. I don't know what has brought us together tonight, but I'm really grateful that you're here. I'm grateful that you're listening. Thank you again to GTM Builders, and we will talk next week. Thank you.